Welcome, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Fumilola Olaolorun. I teach at the College of Medicine, University of Ibadan in Southwest Nigeria, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm one of the co-leads for the Scientific Subcommittee for ICFP 2025, and we're all excited about the opportunity to go to Bogotá in Colombia. Today, for me, it's afternoon. This afternoon, we'll be talking about mastering abstract submission for ICFP 2025. So during our 90-minute session today, we will be talking about why you should submit an abstract for ICFP 2025, the different types of ICFP abstracts. We'll be talking about individual abstracts as well as preformed panels. We'll get into the nitty-gritty regarding how to submit an abstract. We'll talk about the evaluation criteria. We'll talk about a few tips for submitting your abstract, and then we'll have some time at the end for questions and answers. The purpose of the session is to provide you with a brief overview of the submission process, the evaluation criteria, and tips to improve the abstract that you plan to submit. We're not planning to give you a detailed guidance on the differences between research versus program versus advocacy abstracts. That can be found elsewhere. And my colleague Stephanie will be posting some links in the chat so that you can find some of these other resources that are already available for you. So why should you submit an abstract? You need to submit an abstract to showcase your work, because when you submit an abstract, you're able to share the findings of your research or your program or your advocacy activities with peers. You're able to gain visibility. And you're also able to contribute to the advancement of knowledge in your area of expertise. Also, submitting an abstract helps you to broaden your network and to collaborate with a wide variety of people. When you present at a conference, you're able to meet new people, especially people who are working in the same field as you, and find opportunities for collaboration and sometimes opportunities for mentorship as well. Another reason to submit your abstract is so that you can receive feedback from other people who are working in the field, the same field as you. Usually the feedback is very constructive and gives you an opportunity to think about your work in new and different ways. So I'm sure you all know, but just to remind you, the conference will be in Bogotá in Colombia from November 3 to 6, 2025, and we look forward to seeing all of you there. The theme this year is Equity Through Action, advancing sexual and reproductive health and rights for all. And we intend to ensure that equity is part of the process through our preparation, as well as the conference and everything that happens after the conference. ICFP is not just a conference, it's a movement, and we thank you for being part of that movement. There are a variety of tracks that you can submit your work to, and all of these are available on the website. Plus, my colleague Stephanie will be posting additional links in the chat box for you to be able to find these resources. There are 13 different tracks and a 14th catch-all. Please take time to look through each of these different tracks so you can find the one that's most appropriate for your work. This year, we're going beyond just family planning to look into sexual and reproductive health and rights more broadly. And I'm sure you'll be able to find a track that fits the work that you're doing. But if you cannot find a track, then please feel free to use the 14th one, which is overlooked areas in sexual and reproductive health and rights. There are two different kinds of abstracts. We have individual abstracts and we have preformed panels. And we'll talk about each of these in turn. Irrespective of the type of abstract you plan to submit, you have to individual abstracts, you have the option of selecting an alternative track as well. Within each type of abstract, you can submit an abstract that focuses on research. You can submit an abstract that focuses on program implementation, or one that focuses on advocacy and accountability. You can also submit a track in English. You can submit an abstract in English, in French, or in Spanish. And there will be translation at the conference available real-time for each of these languages. Now we'll focus on an individual abstract. If your abstract is accepted, you will be able to give either an oral presentation, a flash presentation, or a poster presentation, whichever one it's accepted for. And we'll speak about this a little more later on during this webinar. The track organizers, after reviewing all the abstracts, will put them in particular sessions. And if you want more information on individual abstracts, again, my colleague Stephanie will be sharing a link for you in the chat. All of this information will be available on the website, including a recording from this webinar, as well as the slides that speak to how you will submit your abstract. Like I mentioned, we have abstracts divided into research, program or best practice, and advocacy and accountability. And the different sections for each of these three types of individual abstracts are similar. You'll need to provide the significance or background of your abstract, whether it's research-focused, program or best practice-focused, or it's advocacy and accountability-focused. You'll also need to provide information on your research question or hypothesis, or your program intervention or advocacy intervention. Next, you'll need to provide information on your methods. You'll also need to provide information on results or key findings, as well as the knowledge contribution of your abstract, or the program implications or policy implications. On the screen, you'll see a few examples of individual abstracts. An example of the title of a research abstract is Child Marriage and Contraceptive Use in Sub-Saharan Africa. An example of the title of a program implementation abstract is Youth-Led Network for Sustainable Sexual and Reproductive Health Programming. And an example of an advocacy-focused abstract title is How Youth Involvement Influences Sexual Reproductive Health and Family Planning Investments. Now, to talk a little bit about preformed panels. The session for the preformed panel abstracts, if accepted, will form an entire session. And the preformed panel submission will include a description of the session, and also it will identify the 3 to 4 speakers who will be speaking during the session, the topics they will be covering, and a brief description of what they'll be talking about. These individuals should come from different institutions, and the work that the panel will be sharing should go beyond the work of a single project, but there should be a common thread. A preformed panel can be presented in multiple languages, and the 3 languages of the conference, again, are English, French, and Spanish. However, at the point of submission, we want you to submit the preformed panel in only one language. This will allow whoever is reviewing the abstract to be able to review the entire abstract as one piece, rather than different people having to review different pieces of the same abstract. Panel organizers need to complete one submission, and that submission will include the overall panel information, as well as descriptions for the individual pieces of the panel. The overall panel information will include the objectives of the panel, the description of the panel, and the implications for research, program, and/or policy. Every individual section should have its own abstract, which will include a title for that section, a background for that section, methods, results, and conclusions. Here are some examples from the last Family Planning Conference, ICFP 2022. On research, for instance, the overall preform panel was titled Method Bias, Who is to Blame? And the 4 presentations that were attached to this panel and part of the session included an in-depth exploration of providers, programs, systems, and norms. The second, drivers of method bias. The third, DMPA-SC self-injection and method bias. And the fourth, the effect of a postpartum IUD program on contraceptive method choice in Tanzania, results from a cluster randomized stepped wedge trial. So this is an example of the titles of a particular preform panel from ICFP 2022 focused on research. Here's another example, also from ICFP 2022, this time focused on program implementation. The overall preform panel was titled Expanding Method Choice, a case study of the unfinished agenda for contraceptive implants. And there were 4 presenters, and the titles for each of the presenters are, as you see on the screen. The first, Expanding Implants Access Through Private Sector Facilities, Experience from Tanzania. The second, Understanding and Addressing Barriers to Implant Removal, Experience from Burkina Faso. The third, Delivering Quality Implant Services in Humanitarian Settings, Shifting Method Mix and Meeting Demand. And the fourth, Introducing Implants to the Method Mix in Humanitarian Settings, a Perspective from Syria. You can see how the work of different organizations in different countries is reflected in the titles of the different presentations that came in the session for this particular preformed panel, focused on program implementation. Here's another example, this time a preformed panel focused on advocacy and accountability. The title of this preformed panel was Evidence-Based Advocacy for Family Planning Budget Accountability. And the titles of the 4 abstracts that came under this panel include Subnational Family Planning Budget Monitoring and Advocacy in Zambia. Second, Budget Evidence Strengthens Coalitions and Influences FP 2030 Commitments in Uganda. The third, Family Planning Budget Scorecard, a game changer for evidence-based advocacy in Malawi. And the fourth, Multiple Evidence Bases Support Robust Advocacy on Government Funding of Contraceptives in Tanzania. Even though these examples each have 4, you may have 3 or 4 presentations in the preform panel that you intend to submit. Now we go into the details on how to submit an abstract. The first thing you do is you create an account or a login. If you had an account in during ICFP 2022, you can probably just log in to the same account. And there's an option for you if you've forgotten your password, as many of us do, so that you can get a new password to log in. But if this is your first time, please create an account, and you'll see the links to logging on to the Drifter platform. Secondly, you need to access the abstracts portal, and then you can submit either an individual abstract or a preformed panel, or even both. And then you have the option to edit or withdraw your abstract. And there's general information about the conference available there as well. So this is what the Drifter platform will look like. I mean, we do have screenshots. So hopefully you'll be able to check this out shortly after the presentation and familiarize yourself with the platform. The link will be posted in the chat so that you can either register as a new user or log in. If you're a new user, you're definitely creating a new account. And if you had an account in the last conference, then you can just sign into that using the same email and password, or clicking at the bottom, if you see the red arrow where it says forgot your password, you can also get a new password. If you prefer using the platform in French, there is a box at the top right corner. You can see where my cursor is here, where you can change the language to French. And then you can click continue to log in and to go to the abstract submission page. Continue is down here where the red arrow is. Once you see this abstract portal, you can click on my abstracts. And this allows you to see all of the abstracts that are associated with your name, so that you can click on the appropriate one after you've started the process of abstract submission. You do not have to complete the process in one sitting. You can always come back and log back in and go to my abstracts and see the list of abstracts that are associated with your name in the ICFP Drifter platform. When you're ready to submit your abstract or start the process of submitting your abstract, you can click at the bottom where you see the arrow. The green box says Submit Abstract. The page that you will see allows you to select the type of abstract that you'd like to submit. As I mentioned before, you can submit an individual abstract, or you can submit a preformed panel. And I mean, you could also do both of these if your work is such that you would like to present both an individual abstract and be part of a preformed panel at the conference. And the arrows point to this. So once you've selected one, you then click on Next. Once you submit the individual abstract, once you've clicked on the individual abstract icon, you'll be sent to the form for the individual abstract, because the form for the preform panel is different. So you'll be sent to one of two forms. You will see submission guidelines below. And under the submission guidelines, you can gain access to the submission guidelines as a PDF in one of three languages. As you can see on the screen, you see here in three different places. The first one is if you want the PDF of the submission guidelines in English. The second here is if you want the PDF in French. And the third here is if you want the PDF guidelines in Spanish. So please click the appropriate here, and you will have a PDF file downloaded that you can use to review the submission guidelines. The submission guidelines are also available on the website, and I'm sure my colleague has posted a link to these in the chat. Then you click Next to continue. Some people have asked if you're allowed to submit abstracts about work that has previously been published, and the answer is yes. And you actually have to answer that question on the submission portal. Has your work been previously published? Yes or no? So if it has been previously published, we ask that you only submit work that was published in March 2024 or after that date, so that it's less than a year old. There's a little calendar icon next to the sub-question if you say yes, so that you can click on the calendar and select when your work was published. There's another question here which asks the language that your abstract will be submitted and presented in. And again, there are three options: English, French, and Spanish. And there will be simultaneous interpretation available at the conference for these languages. So please select the language that you're submitting your abstract in, and it's assumed that you will be presenting in that same language for an individual abstract. When we talk about preform panels, I'll tell you that even though you will be submitting in a single language, the different presenters can present in any of the 3 languages. Next, you'll be identifying the track that your work aligns with. For an individual abstract, you have to identify one main track, but you have the option to select a second track. And then you'll include your abstract title and click Next to continue. In order to submit your abstract, you need to identify whether it's a research-focused abstract, a program or best practice focused, or advocacy and accountability focused. Once you've identified which one is most appropriate, you click Next. And you can always go back if you want to change your mind. There's the button that says Previous. And if you need to take a break and do something else and come back another day, you can save and submit later. So we'll click Next to continue. At the very top on the right-hand side where the arrow is pointing, you can see that research was selected here, but there are options for program implementation and advocacy. Please make sure that you pay attention to the word count for each of these segments of your abstract. You need to provide the significance or background, and you only have up to 200 words for that segment. The next segment is the main question or hypothesis, and you have only up to 100 words. And then you have the methodology. And under the methodology for a research abstract, you'd be expected to provide information on the location, the design, the data source, the time frame, the sample, and the analysis approach. And here you have only up to 200 words. The next section is on results or key findings, and you have up to 250 words. And then knowledge contribution, you have up to 250 words. It's easier, although it's not required, for you to have this information in a Word document and then to just copy and paste into the form for the individual abstract. That's up to you, but I highly suggest that you do that so that you have an idea of the number of words even before you're putting the information in the platform. We're interested in how you intend to engage the audience. Any form of audience interaction that you plan for, there's a space for you to include that here. For instance, do you want to do polls or quizzes during your presentation? Please feel free to do that here. Include that information here. It's not required, it's an optional field. As you must have seen as we've been going along, most of the fields have an asterisk. Those are the required fields. This one does not have a red asterisk and is not required. But we're interested in this information in case there are specific room needs that we need to take into account as we plan for the conference. The next question has to do with the presentation format. You can select any of the 3 format options that you want your abstract to be considered for. Are you interested in an oral presentation, a flash presentation, or a poster presentation? Or perhaps it doesn't matter to you. You just want to present at ICFP and the mode of presentation or the format doesn't matter that much, then feel free to tick all 3. You can tick as many options as apply for you. There are a few additional questions that we'll be going through now. First of all, is the presenter of the abstract under the age of 35 by November 3, 2025? So you need to select yes or no. You'll see that red asterisk there after the question, signifying that it's a required question. Now, we're interested in the age because of the Junior Researchers Travel Award call for applications. And some of these people whose abstracts are accepted will have funding offered. There's another question on the screen. Is your abstract about Colombia, or does it use data from Colombia? Again, we're interested in this because this would be of interest to the National Steering Committee. So please indicate yes or no. Are you willing to present your abstract as a poster if not selected for oral presentation? And you need to respond yes or no here, even if on a previous screen you had indicated that you're willing to present an oral presentation, a flash presentation, or a poster presentation. This is a required question, so please answer yes or no. More questions. Here, we want you to indicate your anticipated funding needs to attend ICFP 2025. We know that by the time you're submitting your abstracts, and abstracts have to submit it by or before March 15, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, we know that at that time, you may or may not have full information on your funding needs. But we'd like you to include what you see as your funding needs as at the time you're submitting your abstract. So we want you to select whichever one is most appropriate here, just one selection. First of all, do you anticipate that your organization will provide full financial support if accepted for oral or poster presentation? Do you anticipate that your organization will provide full financial support if accepted for oral presentation, but not for poster? Do you anticipate that your organization will provide only partial financial support regardless of the presentation type? Or do you anticipate that your organization will not provide any financial support? So please select the response that best fits your particular needs, and then click next to continue. We require that you make these two declarations before you proceed. And when you get there, you'll be able to read them in details. But the first one says that you or somebody else will be registered and available to present at the conference. This is going to be an in-person conference, and there are no options for virtual presentation. And then the second one is about media, and you need to read through and acknowledge before you proceed. Many abstracts that are submitted have co-authors. Collaborative work is always encouraged in the research and program and advocacy fields. So you have an option to add up to 8 co-authors on the form. And you need to indicate who the primary author is, who the presenting author is, and who all the co-authors are. And you can just enter them in and reorder as you need to, as long as all of this is before the deadline on March 15. Sometimes someone who is not an author does the submission on behalf of the authors. So if that applies to you, please click the box next to that statement, not an author yourself, but submitting on behalf of authors. Otherwise, please indicate all the co-authors, including the primary author, the presenting author, and everyone else in the agreed upon order. And you can change the order as long as it's before the deadline. Once you submit the form, each of these co-authors will receive an email. Now, in order to submit your form, after you've entered the information on the co-authors and you finalize your responses, you click submit on the final page. But if you do not get all the way to the final page, then you can save and submit later. But please make sure you return to the form and complete the process by clicking submit before or by March 15, no later than 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. And I highly recommend you do it long before then, as so that there are no problems with glitches at the very last minute. Now we'll move on to submitting a preformed panel. Earlier on, remember you had the option of submitting, of clicking individual abstract or preformed panel. So if you clicked individual abstract, you would see the screenshots that I have shared. If you clicked preform panel, you'll get the preform panel form, and that's what we'll be going through now. Again, like in the individual abstracts, you have the option of selecting a language that you'd like to read the submission guidelines in. And there are 3 here's at the bottom, one for English, one for French, and one for Spanish, so that you can click the appropriate language and review the submission guidelines for a preformed panel. There's the panel introduction form, and in this segment of the form, you'll need to identify a track. So you can only select one track out of the 14. As you'll recall, for the individual abstract, there's the option of selecting a second optional track. But for the preform panel, you can only select one track. And then you need to indicate the language that you'll be submitting the panel in. The panel must be submitted in one of these 3 languages: English, French, or Spanish. However, the presentations can be made in more than one language. We ask that the submission is in one language only, so that whoever is reviewing will be able to assess the entire preformed panel and not have to only look at segments of them, since not everyone is multilingual. On the form, you have a space to put in the title of the panel, as well as the overview. For the overview of the panel, you have a maximum of 400 words. The panel chair information should also be included on this page: the first name, the last name, and the organization that the panel chair is representing. And it's important for us to have the email address for the panel chair, so you have to enter it twice: the first time and then the second time just as confirmation. Then you can enter information about co-submitters. You can add co-submitters for the panel, and they will be able to come in to add their own abstracts, or the chair or one person representing the entire preformed panel can do this for everyone else. So the panel introduction form allows you to add up to 4 preformed panel co-submitters, and you just have to click Add Co-Submitter, as you can see on the screen. Then once the co-submitters are added, they receive an automatic email with sign-in details so that they can submit their respective abstracts. But that's after you have submitted the form. Now, as the preform panel chair, if you're not submitting any abstracts on your own, then you can just click on Submit. But if you're submitting abstracts, you'll need to click on Add Abstract. That will allow you to submit your own abstract, or potentially all the 4 abstracts for the 4 different people on the panel. Or you can have 3 or 4. Now, if you're a co-submitter for a panel, you will receive an email after your information has been submitted on the Drifter platform, and the email will be coming from info@theicfp.org. And this will be an invitation for you to add your abstract to the panel. You just need to click on the link in the email so that you have access to it. After you've added your co-submitters, if you need to add an abstract, you just click on Add Abstract. But please submit the abstract before leaving the web page. Otherwise, the co-submitters will not be able to submit their own abstracts. So submit, and then you can add abstracts for others if you so desire, if that's agreed by members of the panel, or the co-submitters can come in and add their own abstract. So 2 different options. For the co-submitters, you can click on the name of the particular preform panel that you would like to submit to, because there will be some who will have multiple preform panels or multiple individual abstracts or both. So when you get to my abstract, you'll be able to see the preform panel and click on it so that you can proceed with your submission for that particular panel. And then you click on Add Abstract on the next screen. You can see it at the bottom right. So there's a question about whether you're allowed to submit abstracts about work previously published, which I had talked about earlier on when talking about individual abstracts. If your work was published in March 2024 or later, then yes, you can submit that work for ICFP 2025. And you need to indicate this. It's a required question. So you would say yes if you're submitting work that has been published. And you can click on the calendar icon to indicate when it was published. And then you'll see a screen that allows you to put information in for the particular abstract. You need to put in a title after selecting whether it's research or program or best practice or advocacy and accountability. Put in your title and then include information on the background, methods, results, conclusion, and policy implications in the next box. If you intend to interact with the audience during your presentation, please provide information on that as well. That is not required, but you do have to put in a title and you do have to put in an abstract for each of the presentations that fall within the preform panel. There are additional questions as there were for the individual abstract submission. So you need to indicate the language the abstract will be presented in. Like I mentioned before, for a preform panel, even though the submission should all be in one of three languages, English, French, or Spanish, to enable the reviewer to read everything and assess the preform panel submission as a whole, for the presentation at the conference, different abstracts within the panel can be presented in different languages. And so you have the option of indicating which language the particular abstract you're submitting will be presented in. And then there's a question about your anticipated funding needs. So please select one of the four options there as well, based on your understanding at the time you're submitting your abstract. Whichever one best aligns with your situation. And I read these four options out earlier on. The same two declarations that you had to make if you were submitting an individual abstract are necessary for a preform panel as well. So please read these and click yes, and then next. For the co-authors, the abstract submitter can add up to 8 of them, just like in the individual abstract. So there could be multiple co-authors on each of the abstracts, and you have the option of including up to 8. Only the primary authors of the abstract can edit the respective abstract within the panel, but all edits have to be made before March 15, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. And if the person who is entering the information is not an author, there's a box to select that as well. In order to submit your form for the preform panel, after you've entered your co-authors and you finalized the responses, you need to make sure that you click on that blue icon that says submit. And you need to submit an abstract before you move on to another abstract. So if you're the chair and you're entering information for all the abstracts in the session, you need to click submit before you click add abstract. And you can add another panel abstract and add up to 4 before you submit finally. All submissions must be made by the deadline, March 15, 2025, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. You have the option to edit your abstracts until the deadline. And even if you've logged off, when you log back in, you just click on My Abstracts and you're able to see all of the abstracts that you've submitted or that someone else has submitted and included you. But if you're the primary author, you can click on Edit the Abstract, or you can withdraw the abstract if there's a reason to withdraw. Perhaps when you started the submission, you felt like you or somebody else would be able to go to the conference and make the presentation. Perhaps events had overtaken that before the deadline. You are able to withdraw the abstract on your own. And if this happens after the deadline, you're able to reach out to the conference organizers so that you can ask to withdraw the abstract if no one else on the team will be able to present on your behalf. We're very clear about the evaluation criteria, and I recommend that you take time to review these before you submit your abstract finally, because these are the criteria that the reviewers will be given in order to be able to assess the individual abstracts and the preformed panels that you have submitted. The criteria are about the same for both, and the scoring is also about the same for research, program implementation, or advocacy and accountability. It's the application that varies a little bit. Otherwise, they're similar. This is what the evaluation criteria looks like, and I hope that you will take some time to review the criteria. They're available in the submission guidelines document. We will be looking at the relevance of your abstract or your panel to the conference, the relevance to the track that you've selected, the objective and rationale for the abstract, the methodology or approach, the results or key findings, implications or sustainability, and innovation. Are you contributing something new? With respect to the results or key findings, if you're at a stage where your results are not ready, you can include what you anticipate that you will find. We understand that in order to provide innovative results in a conference, sometimes the timelines are such that the results are not ready at the time of abstract submission, but they will be ready ahead of the conference. That said, if you do not provide concrete results, you may not be scored as highly as those who do, but that should not discourage you, because you may still score high enough for your abstract to be accepted. You can read the evaluation criteria provided in the call for abstracts, and the links will be shared in the chat. Also, if you're interested in more information on research or program implementation and advocacy and accountability, there are links to YouTube videos that were created in the past for ICFP that you can take your time to review to get much more information than has been provided during this webinar. A few tips for your abstracts. So don't focus the background only on what is known or what's already known. You should also mention what we don't know about the topic and what gap you intend to fill. Why is your research or program or advocacy needed? Why does it matter? That should be clear from the background. So it's not just to make a couple of statements about what's in the literature, but what's the gap, and what piece of that gap is your research or program or advocacy filling in. Please pay attention to the word limits. Previously, when I showed a screenshot of what you'll see on Drifter, you would see that each of the different segments has its own word limit. So please make sure you stick to the word limit, otherwise it might be truncated by the system. Please make sure you fill out each of the sections as well, because it's important that you provide information for each of these segments. A few more tips. You don't have to have final results, like I mentioned. You can share preliminary results, even if you don't have the final results. And if you don't have any results at all, you can include information on what you expect to find. You and I know that many times when people submit abstracts and the results are not final, they may change after the submission process and before the conference, and that's totally fine. Please provide information as you have it at the time of submission. In the last section, we're interested in how you fill the gap that you identified in your background, not just a simple repetition of the results that you have already shared. How was that gap filled? And what information are you adding to the body of knowledge? Please make sure you take your time to choose the right track, because that will ensure that your abstract has the right reviewers. You should highlight the significance and knowledge contribution. Don't be afraid to submit negative results. Sometimes this is important information as well. You need to emphasize what is new and what is significant about your own work. Make it stand out. Let your abstract be unique. What are you learning and what do you want to share with the world? There are additional resources here that my colleague Stephanie will post the links to in the chat box. And they provide detailed guidance for you for individual abstracts as well as for the preform panel. If you're interested in more examples, please watch the videos that I had mentioned earlier on that are on YouTube. They were prepared for a previous ICFP and are still very, very relevant. So thank you very much for your kind attention, and we look forward to questions and answers right now. And better still, we look forward to seeing you in Bogotá. If you haven't put your questions in the Q&A box, please do so now, and we will attend to as many as we have time for. Also, the questions will be put into a PDF and shared on the website so that those who did not have the opportunity to come today, and even you who are here, if you'd like to review, will have the opportunity to do so. So there's a question here about the stop work orders and whether ICFP is considering extending deadlines for submission. Because staff are asked not to spend time on project-related activities, including conference submissions. And the time period of the stop work overlaps with ICFP submission timeline. At this time, I'm not aware of any extensions, but ICFP has an excellent comms team. And if there are plans for an extension in the future, they will definitely share this information via the usual channels. So please keep watching the website, but I do not have any information about an extension at this time.
Me, I can also jump in here for just
Please
a quick moment, just to let everybody know that we are we're very aware of the situation and we're carefully monitoring it. We have been talking about the potential for extending the deadline for those, specifically for those who are affected by the stop work order. So please do, as Funmi said, sign up for the newsletter or just continue to visit the website and check back. But we are highly aware of the situation, and we will we'll address it in the coming days. Thanks so much.
Thank you. There are a few questions here about the number of abstracts that an individual or an organization can submit. You can submit as many abstracts as you want to. I think there's a limit, Kelly or Christine, if you can remind us of the limit of the number of times that they can appear on the program as a presenting author. Do you
Sure.
have that information ready?
I
Yeah,
do. Yes, it's 2 times. So
okay.
please just it includes moderators as well as oral presentations, but I don't believe that poster presentations are included in that number. So
Thank you. So yes, you can submit an abstract on research, advocacy, implementation, and your organization can submit multiple abstracts. So the restrictions that were mentioned are with respect to an individual appearing 2 times on the program as moderator or presenter, not including posters. So there's a question here. After you finish entering and saving all the required information for a submission, can you go back and edit the submission up to the submission date? The answer is yes. You can go back as many times as you want, as long as it's before 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on March 15, 2025. The format of the oral flash presentation, you have an opportunity, I think it's 5 or 6 minutes. Please correct me with respect to the timing, but it's a shorter presentation than the regular oral presentation. And then you're able to to stand by a poster for further interactions with the audience. Christine, do you want to add to that?
that is correct,
Or
Funmi.
Kelly? Okay, thank you. How many abstracts can an individual person or one organization submit in total? I believe I've answered that. You can submit as many as you want, but for the final program, you can only appear 2 times as an individual. There are no restrictions on organizations, only restrictions on individuals. What are the differences between poster, oral, and flash sessions? So a poster session, you stand by your poster for the period that is indicated on the program. People who are interested will walk through the poster gallery and they will chat with you on whatever your poster is about. Some will just like to read your poster on their own. Some would like to engage with you. And I think it's an excellent way to engage with people who are truly interested in your topic and in the work that you've done. And it allows for collaboration. There are no time limits because you can even continue the conversation, even though you have to bring down your poster, but you can continue the conversation after the poster session. For the oral presentation, you'll probably have about 12 to 15 minutes to present, and you will be part of a session where other people will be presenting. For the oral flash presentation, you have a much shorter time, about 5 or 6 minutes to present, and then you can go and stand by your poster for additional interactions for the rest of the session. Do you need to pay an entrance fee for this conference? There is a fee for registration, if that's what you mean. I'm assuming that the registration fee is what you're referring to. Does anyone from the Secretariat want to share the fee for registration?
Sure, Funmi. We're still working out final details of that based on recent developments. But we will have an early bird rate for low and middle income countries that is separate from high income countries. And then we'll also have a regular rate and a kind of a last minute rate for those that wait until the last minute to get their registrations purchased. So right now we're looking at $400 for low and middle income countries on the early bird. However, there will be a lower rate of $250 for those under the age of 35 at the time of the conference, as well as the people that are within the country of the conference hosting, so in Colombia. So please just stay tuned on those numbers. Once we get closer to registration, we'll be publishing those. As Funmi has mentioned, we will have some specific funds set aside for not just travel, but also registration fees. And in light of what's happening currently, we may discount some of those things for those that are working under the U.S. government funded programs. So we'll keep everybody in the loop. Again, the best way to just keep yourself informed is to sign up for the ICFP newsletter. That will definitely be touching on a lot of these key topics. There's also an FAQs page on the ICFP website, and the abstracts page on the ICFP website will also have updated information. So please don't hesitate to keep checking back in, and we are excited to do what we can. We're talking to a number of partners and sponsors about potentially seeing some additional funds being given for travel and registration for the conference. Thanks, Funmi. And thanks for the
Thank
question.
you, Kelly. Yeah. Here's another question. If we're signing up to be an abstract reviewer and are potentially selected, can we still submit an abstract? Yes. As an abstract reviewer, you can submit an abstract or even more than one abstract because you will not be reviewing your own abstract. And even as a track organizer, you can submit abstracts. You will not be reviewing your own abstracts. Is it possible to upload multiple abstracts? Can multiple abstracts from the same presenter be selected? Yes and yes, you can upload multiple abstracts. Yes, you may have multiple abstracts accepted, but like we mentioned, you can only appear as a moderator or a presenting author twice. So perhaps somebody else on your team will present and you'll just be a co-author, or you may withdraw if you so desire. There are several similar questions, which I'll skip. Well, this one is slightly different. Is it possible to submit more than one abstract? And if so, and both are accepted, will one be required to pay double registration fee? No, you do not have to pay double registration fee. The registration fee is standard, whether you're from, and it's dependent on where you're from. Like Kelly mentioned, there's a fee for low and middle income countries, and there's a fee for high income countries. There's a lower fee for those who are under 35. And there may be some other concessions because of what's happening in the US. Someone is asking for samples of program implementation papers. We have examples of program implementation abstracts in the video links that were shared. So please check out those links on YouTube. Somebody is unable to create a profile on the site. Stephanie, do you have information on how they can receive support if they're having trouble on Drifter?
Yes, so this issue has already been solved. So anyone can now create their account. Thank you so much for bringing this up.
Great. And there are a few other questions related to that as well. Does one decide on the preform panel abstract upfront? What's the process? Yes, you have to, the assumption is that you're working with other people, perhaps in other countries, but you're working on a similar theme and you're from multiple institutions. And so if there's a common thread that pulls all that you're doing together, then you may decide to submit a preform panel abstract. I suggest that you read through the submission guidelines for a preform panel abstract to see if that is most appropriate for the work that you're doing. If not, you can always submit the individual abstracts through the individual abstract forms. The tracks, yes, they're like themes. So please review the 14 tracks, and the links have been put in the chat box. Can you do one combined abstract for a preform panel, or should it be 4 abstracts that add up to the panel? So for a preform panel, you need an overview. That it has to have a title, it has to have an overview. And in addition to that, you need to provide an abstract for each of the presentations. So you cannot have just one combined abstract for the preform panel, but you will have a description of the panel and then 4 or 3 individual abstracts for the 3 or 4 individual presentations. Will it be fine if the research is not ethically reviewed? Yes, you do not have to have ethical approval in order to submit your abstract, but we hope that if you intend to publish your work, you would have obtained ethical approval prior to embarking on the work itself. I do know that for some program abstracts and policy or advocacy, the goal is not to publish, and in such cases, we do not expect you to have ethical approval. And that is not one of the questions that we ask you. Someone says, I have my dissertation that is literature review. Can I send its abstract? Provided that the abstract of your literature review or your dissertation follows the submission guidelines, then yes. Are the 7 evaluation criteria equally weighted? Yes, I think they're relatively equally weighted. They're applied slightly differently to program versus research versus advocacy. Okay, there's Molly's already responding to that one. Is the registration fee to be paid for every co-author attending the conference or only for one? Good question. It's to be paid for every co-author who is attending the conference. And even if you're not submitting an abstract, you're still welcome to Bogotá. Everybody is welcome. So the registration fee is for individuals. There may be some group rates. Kelly, do you want to speak to group rates?
Sure. Right now, if you're buying in a group, it's the same price, but there could be something that we're looking at with regard to a special group rate for groups above a certain number. So thank you for that question. And you can check back in the FAQs for that as we get closer to registration. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. There's a question about a resource person for travel-related matters, especially for persons coming from outside Colombia, and this person is coming from Nigeria. If your abstract is accepted, everybody will get information regarding the available funding based on what you had filled out in the form at the time of submission. But Kelly, can you speak to whether or not at that time there will be a resource person for travel-related matters?
Yes, so there will be a resource person for that. We will host webinars around travel and visas and all of that related to coming into Colombia. We also are working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Colombia, and they're very excited to be working with us, not just as the group that's helping to push through the visa letters and all of that, but also to be a part of the conference. And so we're very excited to be partnering with them, and looking forward to working with all of you to make sure that the visa process getting into Colombia is a very smooth one. So thanks for that question.
Thank you, Kelly. What is the role of the subcommittees on the abstract submission process? And are the pre-conference agendas also defined by this process?
Thanks for that question. I'll take that one as well. So the subcommittees themselves, there is no formal or required process that states that the subcommittees need to do anything with abstract submission, including being track chairs and abstract reviewers. However, there are many people that are serving on the different subcommittees that also are tied into the track topics quite closely in some instances. And so they are serving as reviewers, they are serving as track chairs. But the one thing that many of them are also doing is pulling together preformed panels inside of that subcommittee group, because they're clearly like-minded individuals that are working from multiple organizations, which is one of the key rules and regulations around submitting a preformed panel. Everybody that's on that panel needs to be from a different organization to really foster that collective work. And so we are working with a number of those subcommittees to make sure that they have what they need to submit their preformed panels. Some of them are even creating working groups to move those preformed panels forward and make sure that they have reviewers that are taking a look at each of the different abstracts within those preformed panels. So please let me know if you have any further questions about that. But I would suggest that anybody that wants to be a part of a subcommittee, go ahead and join that subcommittee, and we'll stick the link into the chat to join those subcommittees. Some of them will be shutting down their subcommittee forms to join, because as we get closer to the conference, we want to keep it that tight group that has been working with each other through this entire process to shape the program in their specific area of focus. Again, we'll put the link in the chat to join a subcommittee. We have 11 of them. And so I highly encourage you to do that as soon as you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. I see a few questions in the webinar chat. Please use the Q&A function to make sure that we see your question, but I will respond to the few that I see here in the webinar chat. So someone wants to know what the highest age limit is. I'm assuming that is for submitting abstracts. There are no age limits. If you're 70 and you want to come for the conference and submit your abstract, please do. Will ICFP provide funding if I do not get from my organization? Perhaps. There's limited funding, but you need to indicate about your interest in a funding opportunity at the time you're submitting your abstract. And if your abstract is accepted, you will receive information regarding available funding. There's no guarantee that you will get funding, but you will at least be in the pool of people that will be considered for whatever funds are available. I think most people eventually transfer their questions to the Q&A. Oh, there's a question here about the reason behind limiting age to 35. Kelly, do you want to speak to that regarding the junior researchers? I'm assuming that's what the question is about. Why 35?
Sure. So 35 is the African Union's definition of youth. And so we have a very strong focus on preparing the next generation of family planning leaders, and that includes really making sure that we are doing what we can to foster collaboration with young people. And so we use the African Union definition of youth, which is 35 and under, or under the age of 35, actually. So
Thank you, Kelly. So there's a question here regarding the DHS. Would it be an issue to submit an abstract with, say, the 2013 to 2014 DHS data and make the presentation with new 2023 to 2024 DHS data that will be released in a few months? I do not see any problems with that. As long as you're clear at the time of presentation, because many people will be looking at the abstract book regarding the data set that you're using. Clarity at the time of submission of your abstract and clarity at the time of presentation is all that I think is required. So yes, please feel free to submit your abstract with existing data, and you can update it if your abstract is accepted with newly available data. But please, with the DHS and other existing secondary data sets, please look for something new and refreshing that will shed light on the field. Okay, where can I look further into the topic on the participation formats, like what's a preform panel, what it looks like? Several links have been posted in the chat. Stephanie, I don't know if you could perhaps just post them again for those who may not have been there at the time you posted them, so that everybody has access to the different portions of the ICFP 2025 website.
Yes, of course, I can post them again, and I can also post a link to the webpage, the 2025 abstract, where it has like all the resources that we have been posting on this webinar.
Thank you, fantastic. So there's someone who wants to know if there's a contact person's email in case they have any questions later. Kelly, can you please address that?
yes, there is an abstracts email. It's abstracts@theicfp.org. Christina, correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I think that's right. And we will stick that in the chat for any questions around abstract submission. Thank you.
Thank you. Can anyone submit both poster and presentation abstract? I'm assuming that's poster and oral presentation, yes. And sometimes you don't know the format that your abstract will be accepted at the time you're submitting. But yes, it's possible to have an oral presentation and a poster presentation at the same conference. So there's a question here about whether there are different registration fees for people whose abstracts have been accepted for presentation or panel member. I'm assuming that's individual abstract versus a preform panel. No, the differences in registration fees are, as Kelly has outlined earlier, that will have to do with whether you're from a low and middle income country, or you're under the age of 35, or you're from a high income country, with potential other concessions. So someone says they can pay their registration fee, but not travel and subsistence. I suggest that at the time you are submitting your abstract, that you select the most appropriate of the 4 options with respect to funding. And if your abstract is accepted, please respond to the email that you will receive regarding funding opportunities and hope for the best. Will there be exhibition booths? Kelly, another question for you, please.
Yes, there will be exhibition booths. So similar to the ICFP in Kigali, Rwanda in 2018, the booths will be strewn throughout the convention center. There are multiple floors of the convention center, and we'll have booths almost on every floor, if not every floor. So they'll be integrated into the landscape. They won't be separated out into another room. So yes, we're really excited about the exhibit possibilities at ICFP 2025. And if you are interested in a booth or a sponsorship or a side event, you can find that information on the website at dicfp.org under the partnerships tab at the top of the website.
Thank you, Kelly. Someone is thanking you here for your response on the subcommittees and stating that she has filled out the form to join the demographic dividend twice, but has not received a response. Can you provide any guidance for her, please, Kelly?
Yes. So Amarachi will reach out to you. Some of the invitations that we're sending out are getting caught in people's spam filter. So first and foremost, please take a look at your spam filter and make sure that they aren't getting stuck in there. But Amarachi will reach out to you. She's on the line now. She's our community liaison, and so she'll reply to you in the chat. Thanks, Ann.
Thank you, Kelly. I think I've gone through the questions that I can find in the webinar chat, as well as the Q&A segment. I don't know if Christine or Kelly or Stephanie have any additional feedback for the group.
This is feedback on what from me?
I mean, any other information that you'd like to share?
I don't think so. I think we've covered most of the elements around this particular piece. Anything on your side, Christina or Amarachi?
No, just thank you to Funmi for a wonderful session.
Absolutely.
Nothing from my side either. Thank you for me.
Thank you also very much for your time, and thanks for all the support from the Secretariat. So I guess everybody gets 10 minutes back to do whatever you want. See you in Bogotá.
Thank you. And please don't hesitate to reach out to the abstracts email that we put into the chat if there are any questions that pop up between now and when abstracts close. Thanks so much, all.